Howdy howdy, good whatever time it is for you, Manny here, and so if you didn't know this already, I have a webcomic called Fighting Dreamers, which is the dreaming form of house cats that jump into various dream worlds and fight off the monsters inside them. I actually have a big old video of me explaining what would have happened had I continued the comic in the way that it is currently. I'm going to reboot it eventually, but this isn't the point of this video. I want to ramble about the true history of the Alpha Trio, and it's more fun to do it in a separate video because I think anyone who's coming in here blind is gonna think the lore is interesting, and any past or current readers who are archive binging this thing right now and have reached this point, like, what is Manny talking about? It would have taken forever to reach this point anyway, and it's probably easier to have it split off from the rest of the big rambly thing. And I may or may not make an AMV based on this, but for anyone who's artistically inclined and wants to try it for themselves, you go right ahead. This will be a good base plate for you. Alright, let's get going. So for the uninitiated, the Alpha Trio is a thing in history where the first three cats that ever existed as dreamers got a little too close to the edge of the dream bubble that they were in and damn near got sucked into a portal, but it worked out, they're fine. Well, mostly fine, because the act of doing that made them start reincarnating into three cats with the same dominant power and same eye color. And the reincarnations find each other after they've all had their respective first respawns and see the vision. They usually respawn about the same time as far as age goes, but not necessarily the same year. But when they reconnect after the fact and realize what's up, the monsters immediately start going insane. And those three are generally dead within the year. Now here's what history got right. The first three's names, roughly translated, are Frost, Spark, and Ember, with their blue ice, yellow lightning, and green fire powers respectively. Although, granted, the first three and any of the first gen cats had the most concentrated version of the powers. Not exactly double dominant, but pretty damn close to it. They were all siblings, although what their genders were was kind of lost, and even in like any flashbacks, no one ever mentions it. So I've just been using they, them, but any pronouns are correct for them. And these three were the spearhead to get things going with when the other cats started showing up and get society started. And it was working out pretty good. I mean, yeah, the monsters were a little bit concerning, but they figured out how to work that out, and now everything's chill. And then at some point, years down the line, they just vanished. The cats had no idea where they went, but there were some babies that came around that were suspiciously similar to them. This kind of earned them unofficial demigod status, and they were like, prophesized to be cats that continued to help, and it was all cool. Eventually they got kind of shoved to the wayside as society got more and more advanced and the buffer zone became what it is today, because they're not as necessary anymore. And then, at some point, they just kind of faded to obscurity. Soon, cats were like, are they even real at this point? Like, was that just some sort of myth? A TV show even popped up called Alpha Trio Chronicles, which is the dramatic Doctor Who-ish Grey's Anatomy version of the Alpha Trio myth, which kind of made anyone that claimed that they were the three kind of get ignored because, oh, what are you trying to, pretend, for the TV show? Only for Lily, Tamara, and Walter to show up in their version of the 70s, and everyone lost their collective minds. They even had a cameo in the TV show, something alternate timeline Alpha Trio, only for them to die, within that month. But not before Lily had Marshmallow, who had Mildred, who had Tabby, who had Sandy. And that's pretty much the extent of everyone's knowledge of the Alpha Trio. But that's not how things actually went, because there was a fourth sibling. The runt of the litter, and started off pretty sickly, Twig was the small one, the youngest sibling. The one that Spark, the oldest, tried not to get too attached to because they were just gonna die anyway. The whole instinctive thing of the weakest cat is kind of useless to us sort of deal. Kind of just dismissing anything that Twig said, being the self-imposed leader once all four of them figured out that they were in a dream world with abilities. So unsurprisingly, Twig got frustrated by this, and acted out by, oh, look at this, I'm gonna touch the edge of the dream bubble, look at me, and promptly got sucked into the void, or would have if Ember was not right there, immediately running and grabbing for them. It took a second for Spark and Frost to realize what was going on, and they all grabbed at the same time to try and pull their sibling back in, gaining the scars that we all know. But Twig's plant abilities were more like trees instead of like proper like gooey fungusy stuff, so all of those branches snapped and thoop, they were gone. Ember was inconsolable. Frost didn't totally get what was going on, but they were also kind of spooked. Spark was in full denial. They were like, it's fine, it's all good, we're okay, because we're gonna wake up in the waking world, I guess, and then come back down here, and they'll be back. Twig will be fine, and then we can apologize. So when they didn't wake up with everyone else, Spark was a little bit messed up. And they didn't really have time to process that because now the other cats were starting to filter in new dream forms, all confused by this new world that they were in. And Spark, in their infinite wisdom, which wasn't much because they were all 8 months old, by the way, they were like, how about we just don't mention the fact that Twig got sucked into the void? We can tell them later, but right now, focus on not letting them touch the wall ever. I am not kidding. I will personally kick their ass if they try. So these 3 teenagers, Sparky especially, became the leaders of everyone. And Sparky spearheaded the whole, let's block off the wall immediately. No one goes there. But what they didn't realize was that Twig wasn't actually dead. They were in fact in the void, protected by their abilities into a sort of root ball, and being in the void for an indeterminate amount of time really messed with their abilities and turned them all weird and mutated and gunky and almost fungus-like. It took them a while to get awareness. They would take their abilities and unconsciously leech other dream worlds and use them for sustenance, but they didn't properly wake up until maybe 5-ish years after everything happened, when everyone was all settled, the society was all good, and oh, look at that, portals are showing up. That's weird. The portals that Twig was making without realizing because they were leeching off the planets and getting the very early monsters in there. Not that the cats knew about it yet. They just knew that the portals would show up, they would sit there for a while, and then kind of shatter almost. It was kind of alarming, actually. They started sending cats in there, and some of them did not come back, but there's a handful that did, and they started explaining everything, and everyone was like, oh, okay, so we need to go in the portals, alright. And soon they were hounding the other dream worlds for resources, and occasionally encountering the A classes, or at least very early, weak versions of them. And as these cats are checking out the different dream worlds, Twig kind of gets an idea of what they're talking about as they're in there. They're not strong enough to actually go for them or anything. Not that they're against them at all. And they just start hearing nothing about themselves. They don't hear themselves being name-dropped. Twig doesn't exist. What the hell? It's to a point when the first 3 are finally in a dream world by themselves for the first time since Twig started getting awareness. And that's finally when Twig woke up for real and it was like, what the hell? You guys forgot me. Your sibling. Your youngest sibling. You always forget me. They tried their best to explain, but Twig did not even give them a chance. They were immediately ripped apart by their newfound abilities. To a point where even their souls got ripped apart to shreds and flung all out into the void where Twig lived. And because these dream bubbles and the void are directly based off the furthest ring in Homestuck, you know what I'm talking about. The void is just not logical as far as time goes. Stuff can happen right next to each other or really far apart, including the 9 lives system. So when the 3 soul fragments got launched into the void, they all simultaneously hit all of the cats that they would eventually reincarnate into. Because the reincarnation is only legit after the first respawn. So when they kind of show up again, the second reincarnations show up by themselves in a dream world, Twig is Why are they back? And kills them again. Meanwhile, the first three, Spark, Frost, and Ember, are constantly trying to find Twig because the last moments before getting ripped apart were like, why didn't we know this sooner? We need to find them again and actually apologize this time. And like the first maybe 5 or 6 reincarnations, they have that thought in their head very strong. Probably because these were the cats in the immediate radius that fit the criteria for the main 3 to reincarnate. But they never got far enough to like properly fulfill this task because Twig kept killing them way too fast and resetting everything again. And this is the part in like the comic / animated thing where the loop starts happening. The 3 wake up, the 3 find Twig, Twig kills the 3 over and over and over. And then you just see a fast forward of like Twig taking other worlds and turning them into part of themselves, and the little worlds turning into hives for like other monsters. And then the Dreamer Cats are also spreading around because it turns out some of these dream worlds are other little pockets of different cats. So they're connecting with like different bits of like metal and plant abilities and earth abilities, and it eventually turns like more refined, more built up, until they're kind of their own little satellite space station looking thing. And it wouldn't be fast at first, it'd be like a hive world spitting out monsters in a radius to nearby dream worlds, starting to take over. Some of them get cleaned up, some of them don't. Other dream worlds turn into little hubs to the buffer zone, and there's some that just kind of stay as they are. It's just a big old tug of war from either side with like a center point of dream worlds that keep getting taken over and not taken over. And it's like that whole record thing where like the music gets faster and faster and faster and faster as this just keeps happening really, really fast to kind of indicate that, yeah, this is going on for like centuries, thousands of years even. There's also a point in the back and forth where like panels will pop up and show random bits of history instead of the 3 dying over and over again. And it's kind of a brief run through of how the grandchildren of the Stet religion came to be, and it's basically the cats who are reincarnating and had like crazy memories from it got a little bit confused about everything that happened because this was like enough generations removed that they couldn't remember as clearly what was up with the siblings. So eventually one of them, probably Spark, turned into like the mother of Abluk and Susie, who were basically Frost and Ember respectively. They did get the monster part right though. You know, the whole thing with the third child, Ramus. Albeit in a more mythical sense where they were just annoyed that they were ignored and were like, I'm gonna make monsters just to spite you guys. And then the background scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, things get bigger, and then we cut again to another point in history where one of the reincarnations was like, wait a second, the monsters go crazy when all of us find each other again. So how about we just make sure that we never find each other again? So the Spark reincarnation, because of course it is a Spark reincarnation, decided, hey, I'm gonna make a society that is some sort of cool name related to like hiding the fact that the Alpha Trio exists to begin with. If anyone has any ideas or makes up their own thing, I'm totally cool with that. And they are the reason that after like 1920s, 30s-ish, at least in their version of it, the Alpha Trio just stopped showing up. They pushed propaganda that was basically like, these guys never existed, that's part of history. They even made the Alpha Trio Chronicles show, maybe like 5-10 years after the fact, to push it further, that these guys aren't real, they're just a plot device. Kind of poke fun at Doctor Who's whole situation where they had like a established show for a while, and then it kind of stopped, and then a new crew picked it up again to try and be cool for the new generation. So by the time Lily's crew shows up, the society as a whole, outside of this like secret organization trying to hide them, doesn't really remember why they're such a huge deal, and what happens with the monsters. And of course, Sandy Patch and Stewie, being the protagonists of the series, are the last trio because they're the ones, with Ghost's help, and Gracie and her 2 alternate timeline selves taking a time bubble and freezing everybody in the Monster Core, they finally talk to Twig, they get everything settled, and the reincarnations don't happen ever again because everyone's all good. But not before the organization decides to try and capture them for being the Alpha Trio and the first ones to like really be found, because we're not letting you in any universes. But they manage to break out with everyone's help. There's a cool epic thing where they're all going into this world that's really close to Twig's whole core thing. And then there's a fun little sequence after the fact where, okay, cool, everything's chill. We need to get out of this world. So Gracie's all rewind everything. The bad timeline Gracie vanishes because that's all she was needed to do. And then they're in the first chapter's universe? Oh my god, they are. There's Stewie being cringe, just laying on the roof, being a little hellion. And then Patches is just chatting away with Sandy. Hey, wait a minute, there's a monster. There's a monster, look out, there's a D-class behind you. Sandy, who is all frazzled by everything, yells this at Patches. And that's why she was weird and shouty for the first chapter, because that was her future self yelling at Patches to get out of the way. And all three of them have a moment of like, oh my god. And Grace was like, oh, a stable time loop. Anyway, let's get out of here. So they get into the buffer zone just as the fight's starting. They go forward in time just enough to be right before everything went off in, like, the final fight. And, like, everyone who had, like, portaled themselves out because things were starting to get a little bit sideways and they wanted to get everyone safe, they see their friends coming back, like, within minutes after the fact, and they're all like, yeah, everything's great, yay! Everyone fixes the buffer zone that had been destroyed. Gracie, when she's old enough, is like, oh yeah, right, I need to go back and fix everything. And wears the knitted gear that she gets from Molly and just vanishes to do the chapter 2 thing. And everything's hunky-dory, and then cue the credits of everyone growing up all nice and happy, and that's the end of Fighting Dreamers. Sandy and Patches getting married, Stewie finding a partner, Ghost finding other monster hybrids because they were not the first case of this, and just overall having a good time. The monsters will never be gone, but they're also never going to be insane strong again, and now going to Dream Worlds is kind of more of a chill situation after you take care of a few of the monsters in there. The group is significantly older, like we're talking like 8 years old, thereabouts, and Stewie is the head fighter, Patches is his right hand, and Sandy's just kinda off doing her own thing. At least until she wakes up one morning and talks to Gracie, and Gracie knows what's up. They had an agreement after all, where Sandy knows that she's about to die, and you know, they have like a little bit of time in the waking world and dreaming world transition, so they're like, how about we go to one more dream world, just the three of us. They copy the first things they said in canon, and then the series ends. I was not expecting that to turn into me talking about the end of the series, but I guess that works. I mean, granted, all of this stuff would have been compounded in like a 2-part season finale, maybe, so it kind of makes sense. But that was, oh, I guess that's the end of the rest of it thing. And also the lore in the Alpha Trio. So that's fun. And I know this is almost 20 minutes long, but I'll put a timestamp for this part. It'll be like the retrospective and what I will do when I eventually reboot this thing, because I have better plot stuff in my head now. And also just random little factoids that pop in here and there. I should have actually fleshed out Pickett more, because Pickett is the one who is the head fighter, who is Sandy's great aunt, who raised her mom, and just has all of this baggage with her sister, Mildred, and it would have been so cool to have, like, maybe a whole thing where, like, Pickett's getting put to sleep, but there's, like, a window of time where she can be in the buffer zone and get her affairs in order, and she talks to Sandy, and they have a sort of understanding, and then she actually dies, and Sandy has a moment for a chapter about it, and then it's just kind of in the background for the rest of the series. And there'd be stuff with the new head fighter, but I think that would just be, like, a minor thing, because by that point, that's when the Alpha Trio stuff is kicking off, and they're like, oh god. Second thing, that whole society thing that I made up as I was doing this recap, I should figure that out. I think that would be cool in the reboot, because then there would be a whole conflict of these guys being like cats that could be anybody, and it would just be a whole thing. Third thing, the first three as a whole, I think it would be fun if, like, say this series is voice acted, that they have the same voice actors as Sandy Patches and Stewie. Although not necessarily they're associated, like, elemental cat. But it'd be something to make the audience point at the screen and be like, yeah, oh my god, that's such a cool call-out. Speaking of the hypothetical series, something that I think would be cool as hell is the music that always represents the Alpha Trio, and the first three, at least in, like, every flashback prior to this, would have, like, you know, 3-beat thing, and you think, oh, that should be a waltz. Why is it 4/4 time? It's because one beat is missing, and then you put it together, and it's like, oh, there was one piece missing! That represents Twig! And now it sounds more complete! Yes! Love music stuff like that. Would love to figure out music a little bit better someday. Not right yet, though. I'm still kind of fixated on 3D. And, yeah, I'm just gonna end it here before I get too far off in going off on a tangent about different things. If I think of anything else, I guess I'll just yell about it on, like, Blue Sky or something. So, thank you guys for watching. For those of you who have been following for years, thank you for sticking around and checking this out. And for the archive bingers, again, thank you for reading through. I apologize that things got a little bit weird in Chapter 8. And for complete strangers who have stumbled upon this and actually found it interesting to hear me ramble about stuff that they have no idea what I'm talking about, I hope you enjoyed my enthusiasm for it. And also one final shout out to Hethros. Years ago when I did streams, we were doing stuff with stream avatars and they were all like little Dreamer characters, and he took that and ran with it and made his own comic in the Fighting Dreamers universe. And I'm gonna use my word of God powers to say that, like, it is canon to the Fighting Dreamers series. Like, this is happening. My headcanon, I guess, is it headcanon if it's an offshoot of my series, is that it's happening either simultaneously with the main canon or running a little bit further ahead, like maybe a year or two after everything happened. But either way, these guys have no idea what's going on in the other branch. I could see a news report happening in their branch being like, it's been a year after that one branch got messed up by the monsters, but everything's okay now, and we're gonna do a documentary and talk to the 3 cats that helped make this all possible. They saved the branch, yada yada yada. And then the characters in Hethros' version are like, yeah, alright, and then they kind of move on because, you know, they got other stuff to deal with. Hethros, if you're listening, you don't have to follow that. You can do whatever you want. Just, like, we can hash it out. I love your series. I'm so excited that Fighting Dreamers is continuing in some form, and I hope to see more of it. And then also, if you, like, kind of stop doing it, that is also fine. Alright, I gotta get off for my cat claws at my legs. Catty is meowing at me at the floor as I'm speaking because she is starving to death even though she doesn't have her second serving of food for another hour as of recording. So have a good night, y'all. I'll see you in some other thing.